If you're looking for tips on your private pilot check ride, this video may be helpful to you. What you're gonna see is Travis going over stage check 3. We have stage checks on a Part 141 school because that's what's required by the FAA. This just makes it to where we can gauge the student's success as they move through each rating. That being said, what he's gonna be talking about is very similar to a check ride. Now he's gonna call it an EOC. The reason we call it an EOC is because Thrust Flight, as a Part 141 school, does have examining authority. It's the equivalent to a check ride. It just means that we can do in-house check rides with our own staff. All of this terminology might get a little bit confusing depending on what sort of training you're doing, Part 141, Part 61. I just wanted to clear some of that up for you guys so it's a little easier to understand. Now, let's go ahead and pass it over to Travis.
All right, getting ready for stage 3. Stage 3 private is going to be both a combination of stage 1 and stage 2. It's going to essentially be a mock EOC, and for all intents and purposes, it's likely going to be slightly more difficult than the EOC, just to make sure that you're 100% ready to take that final ride to get your private pilot's license. Much like stage 1 and stage 2, the beginning of this is going to look very similar. We're going to need to have all your documents. This is how every stage check, every ride you go on is going to start. You're going to have to have all your documents. So student pilot certificate, you need your government issued ID, medical, weight and balance. You'll all be doing another cross-country flight plan here, so make sure you have your VFR nav log. And then with your logbook specifically, this is again a mock EOC for all intents and purposes. So everything needs to be totaled up correctly, logged, in pen. You need to have all necessary endorsements for that point in time. And for the document portion, that's going to be it. The knowledge areas that we're going to be covering on the ground portion is going to be all tasks required by the ACS. So again, combining stage 1 and stage 2 private, we're going to start this. If you look at the ACS, we're pretty much going to go in order of what the ACS has. So starting right off the top, pilot qualifications. What do you need to be qualified to be a private pilot? What documents do you need to have with you to be a private pilot? Can you fly any airplane as a private pilot? So not only knowing what you can do, but what are your limitations? Where does your privileges begin and end? Is going to be a really important topic here. Airworthiness requirements, same thing here. What makes the plane airworthy? What documents? What inspections? Be prepared for some scenarios on this. We're not expecting you to only fly airplanes here at Thrust Flight, so we have one way of keeping track of our documents. How would you check these documents for other airplanes? Let's say you wanted to go rent an airplane, or you wanted to take a friend or your family member up. What would that process look like to ensure the airplane was airworthy? Weather is going to be a huge topic on these stage checks for obvious reasons, and I guess not so obvious reasons, right? Want to make sure you're making good decisions. Can you safely take off and land under what conditions? So knowing your own limitations, you'd be expected to have a personal minimums sheet on this stage check and your EOC, letting us know what weather you're comfortable flying in, both ceilings, visibility, and then wind. And then how we stay safe in the weather, what to expect from different weather phenomena. Not just rote memorization of a cold front is X, Y, and Z, but what kind of conditions are associated with that? How might that impact our flight now? How might it impact it later? All things like that. So start thinking outside the box of what those weather implications mean to you and your safety of flight. Cross-country flight planning is going to be pretty similar to stage 2 here. There's not going to be anything new introduced. Your nav log will just be to a different destination, but the requirements of it are all going to be the same. Can you talk me through how you got your true airspeed? Can you tell me how we got our course heading? Why did you choose this altitude? Talk me through your route selection here. Why are we going this way instead of that way? Are we going to be flying over any airspaces that we shouldn't be? What are some of those airspaces? More national airspace system stuff here. So cloud clearance requirements, equipment requirements to enter those airspaces, anything associated with Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and then special use airspaces as well. Performance and limitations. So same thing on the weight and balance. You have your performance calculations. We'll talk through those. And then we'll get more into the nitty gritty here of what factors impact the aircraft performance. How does humidity impact it? How does density altitude impact it? How does temperature impact it? What about icing? Can I fly into icing? All of these things are going to get thrown into the stage 3 check as well. We'll do a deep dive into systems on stage 3. So you'll be expected to know the ins and outs of everything about the Archer, our electrical system, the fuselage, power plant, landing gear, brake system, aileron type, flap type, all of that's going to be in the systems check here. So make sure you're intimately familiar with the systems, because we'll do a deep dive on those. And then we'll wrap up with human factors. So what affects like aeromedical factors? Are you safe? What's that checklist look like? What does PAVE look like? What's your decision-making process? Medications that might impact your ability to fly, and then more on like hypoxia and various things like that that could potentially be a human factor when flying. So the ground here for stage 3 is going to cover everything that would be in your mock EOC or Checkride. So we'll be covering every task here in the ACS. So I recommend you get very, very familiar with the ACS. If you're familiar with that, you'll know step by step what the process is going to look like and what this test is going to look like. The only surprise was probably going to be something along the lines of a scenario given by the evaluator. And if you have the basic skills and knowledge of how to handle that situation, then it's just going to be applying that to the specific example given by the evaluator. So get familiar with the ACS. If there's anything that you're not sure on, look it up in the PHAC or the FAR-AIM or whatever reference material you have, bookmark it. And then if you get yourself in a position where you don't know the answer to something, always tell folks, don't confidently give somebody the wrong answer if it's 50-50. That's going to be an example of bad ADM. You're going to knowingly give the wrong answer when you're on the fence about it. So if you don't know, just look it up quickly. If there's one or two things you don't know throughout the ground portion of this exam, that's okay. Again, the expectation isn't perfection. It's, are you going to be a safe pilot? Do you have the competence and confidence to get through this? And if you are encountered with a scenario that you haven't encountered before, which is going to happen, how are you going to handle it? What's your thought process going to look like? Do you have good flows in place that are going to help you get through these difficult scenarios? So if you do all that, you should put yourself in a good position to be successful. All right, stage 3 flight. This will be, let's set the stage here. You're going to be PIC. We're assuming that for all intents and purposes, you're a private pilot at this point. You just have to get through your EOC. So start putting yourself in that mindset. You are going to be making the decisions to keep us safe. You're going to be responsible for traffic avoidance, for making sure the airplane's airworthy. We've got everything we need. Good passenger briefings. All of this stuff is important. It's really easy to get into, the thought loop here that, just doing practice flights that everybody knows what's going on. Again, assume that the examiner is just a passenger today, right? So put yourself in that mind. You're PIC. In the event of an emergency, you're going to follow my instructions. This is what we're going to do. If you don't feel comfortable with the situation or traffic avoidance, vocalize that. Hey, there's this airplane that's close by. I'm going to fly this direction. I'm going to wait a second before I start this maneuver. So situational awareness, traffic avoidance are going to be a really hot topic on this one. So take your time with that. Make sure you're being safe, make sure the area is clear, and make sure you're really following your checklist. Always tell people on this one, take your time. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So kind of what to expect for the flight after we've done the pre-flight, we've gotten the plane, we're going. Similar to how we left on stage 2, we'll be doing stage 3. So expect a performance takeoff and then expect to follow your nav log for 10 to 20 minutes. From there, you're going to be using your pilotage and dead reckoning to use your nav log. Expect a couple questions from your examiner. How did you get this ground speed? Why is our ground speed different than what it was? Make sure here that you're changing your heading as we get from point to point. Make sure we're doing our climbs whenever we're supposed to do our climbs. And that, again, you can talk through your nav log here. At some point in time, 10 to 20 minutes into the flight, your examiner is going to break you off from the nav log, and then you'll begin the remaining flight portion. So from here, we're going to be doing a lot of the same stuff from stage 2. Expect some type of diversion, right? A sick passenger, hypoxia, carbon monoxide, hyperventilation, they're sick, whatever the scenario is. Expect VOR tracking and intercepting. One quick way to make sure that you cover this, put a VOR on your nav log, and that'll show that you can do that. Tune into it, intercept it, and that's your requirement for that piece. So if putting a VOR radial in for your nav log works, I recommend that. Expect multiple emergencies here. Could be a PFD failure, could be wing fire, could be an electrical fire, engine failure, engine fire, something of that nature. So expect multiple emergencies here. And then again, USPIC, what are you going to do? What does it mean to land as soon as possible? What does it mean to land as soon as practical? What's the difference between the two, and how are you going to navigate those scenarios? And again, this is in no particular order, but kind of expect something along these lines. You'll go into your air work, so slow flight and stalls. Again, everything for stage 3 is going to be held to ACS standards. So make sure you know the ACS standards for all the maneuvers, and you can talk through those. So we'll be doing power on stall, power off stall, and steep turn for our air work. And then again, some type of an emergency. So probably expect one emergency before, one emergency after, or maybe one coming back in to Addison after you do your landings, or getting lost, something to that effect. We'll do ground reference maneuvers. So S-turn, turn around a point, and then you'll wrap up with landings typically. So again, you're going to have to do a normal landing. You have to do a soft field and short field landing and takeoff. So whichever takeoff you didn't do in Addison, you would do at the other airport that you land at now. We have to see a go around. We have to see you come to a full stop landing. So expect a full stop or stop and go at some point. And outside of that, again, go arounds are free on the landing. So if your landing's unstable, you know you're going to be long or short, something happens, really, really encourage you to do the go around. One other thing I like to highlight on this, and I guess that's worth mentioning on stage 2 and 1 as well, is good traffic patterns here. A good traffic pattern makes for a good landing. So make sure that whenever you're setting up for the traffic pattern, one, are we entering the pattern correctly? So take your time, figure that out. Bug your downwind heading, bug your TPA, so you know what those are ahead of time. Get everything set up so you can enter the pattern correctly. Make sure we're not going too fast or too slow. If you can, have visual reference points for where your downwind leg and base leg and all that should be, so we can fly a consistent pattern. If you can fly a consistent pattern, you'll have a much better odds of doing good, consistent landings. So expect 2 or 3 landings at the second airport that you go to, likely Terrell, Caddo, Mesquite, McKinney, something like that. You'll do those landings, and then from there, you'll take it back home. Let's double click on emergencies here for a minute. So emergencies, what the expectation here is that if you look at your checklist, you'll have items in bold. Those items in bold are to be committed to memory. That should be a part of your flow, that as soon as I say engine fire, you can execute the engine fire checklist items in bold. After that portion's done, we want to quickly and decisively do that. We don't want to rush it, right? If we rush things, it can just lead to more issues. So quickly and decisively do that. From there, you always want to revert back to the checklist. Again, high stress situations, it's easy to forget things. So let's run through it, make sure we didn't miss any steps. And then from there, we want to execute the emergency checklist, emergency landing checklist. So most of these emergencies are going to come in 2 parts. You're going to have the initial emergency that we're going to take care of. And then from that emergency, now we're going to have to make an emergency landing. So there'll be a separate checklist for the emergency landing. You want to make sure that you get that out. And again, run through the flow. A couple common errors I see with the emergencies is once somebody starts a checklist, they feel the need to complete the whole thing right then and there. This is not one of those situations. If the order of operations is going to be aviate, navigate, communicate. So the first thing we're going to do is fly the airplane. Make sure that our airspeed's good. We're at VG. Make sure that when we're making emergency landing, we're continuously heading that direction. If you keep your head down for 10 seconds, it's going to be really easy to pitch up, pitch down, start doing a turn inadvertently. So how I recommend folks do this: do 1 or 2 items on the checklist, look up, check where I'm going to land, check my airspeed, check my heading, come back, execute another couple steps of the checklist, and then just back and forth like that all the way down to the ground. Really important to do that emergency landing checklist, because that's securing the airplane for the emergency landing. So just because you got the fire out or we picked out a field doesn't mean that we're necessarily ready to set up and land. We want to make sure that we've squawked the correct transponder code. We want to make sure we've communicated with emergency services if we had time, like, hey, this is what's happening, this is where we're going, and then securing the airplane to land. Getting everything turned off that we can, getting the door unlatched. All of these items are very important. So in emergency situations, quickly and decisively execute the bold items, and then from there, with the emergency landing checklist, if time allots, start executing as much of that emergency landing checklist as you can. But again, there's a balance here. Once you start it, that doesn't mean you have to get it done within 10 seconds. So just start doing it, look up, make sure you're still flying the airplane, look back down, and so on and so forth until you've completed the emergency scenario.